I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
And welcome. We're always back behind the scenes. Welcome to Unleashed AF, the podcast where we help you to own your greatness and unleash your authentic self. I'm Deidre Beacham, your visibility catalyst and recovering nice girl, here with the incomparable Jenny Battig. For our new listeners, I work with high-achieving women to recognize and obliterate their nice girl training, speak their mind, and get shit done. You like my new intro?
Sure. Yeah.
Now I'll hand it over to Jenny.
My favorite part.
Huh?
I said I like the get shit done part.
Yeah, get shit done. I'm going to hand it over to Jenny, our resident inner space engineer.
Well, thank you. The similarly incomparable Deidre. Hi, everyone. As an inner space engineer, I draw on my background of human factors engineering and hypnotherapy to help rewire your mindset so that you can unlock your true potential.
Ooh. You are amazing too. I'm telling you, Jenny has made a huge difference in my life. So she's incredible. But let's talk about what today's topic is. And you're going to learn even more about how incredible Jenny is. Today we're diving into unleashed EQ, emotional quotient, mastering emotional intelligence for real change. So before we get into that, as always, we love hearing from you. Make sure you please drop your thoughts and questions in the chat or comments. And let's make this a dynamic conversation if we can. You know that Jenny and I are going to do. So if you have a topic or question for us, please head over to WWJDD on our website, which is What Would Jenny and Deidre Do? unleashedafpodcast.com. Or you can also apply to be a guest there as well. And now let's jump in with our topic today, emotional intelligence. So I know that this is something you were really excited about, Jenny. So talk to us a little bit about emotional intelligence.
Yeah, well, it kind of came up a little bit last week when we were talking about observation versus perception, because part of what can influence our perception of things is our emotional intelligence. So it felt like a good thing to kind of flow into, to go into that a little deeper this week. And that's part of what I'm incorporating into my business service offerings as well. So it kind of works out for me too. So one of the first things I wanted to do, because I don't know that a lot of people understand really what we're referring to when we talk about emotional intelligence. So I did find sort of a definition, I guess, to make sure we're at least on
growing
the
up.
same page.
We never talked about emotional intelligence growing up, not in our generation. It was all about your intelligence. So tell us about this.
Right. The IQ was important. The EQ, we never heard of it. No. So basically, what I found was it's basically being aware of your own emotions and the emotions that others are having, in order to have more control over your behaviors and interactions with others. So think about how empowering that is, to be more control over your behaviors. And some of that behavior is just how you react to other people. Right? I mean, that's, even though on its own, it may not sound like emotional intelligence is related to becoming unleashed, but when you can control your reactions to people, they can't push your buttons. Right?
Exactly. And that's the thing I didn't get for a really long time, because when my buttons were pushed, I was always thinking, well, this person, I don't like the way this person is acting. I don't like the way and they need to change. They need to change. And while that may be true, while that may be true, my reaction I can completely control.
Right.
And if I'm not in touch with that, if I don't have that emotional intelligence, then I can't control what happens to me because I'm so focused on the other person. I think that's the biggest thing I didn't understand, that I could understand myself, but true emotional intelligence, at least as I am understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand, true emotional intelligence is not just being able to see and understand, but also to be able to control what's happening inside of you.
Absolutely.
So
Yep, and to be able
how
to
in the
have
world would
empathy
Mhm.
for the people around you so that it doesn't become just like you feel like you're beating your head up against the wall because everybody else needs to change, and why won't they change? Right? I mean, that's for me, I know prior to getting into this line of work, I would get so frustrated with people that just didn't seem to get things the same way I did, and would try to be pushing for like a different agenda. And I'm like, where are they coming from? How can they possibly be seeing things this way? And honestly, it still happens at times
Oh, sure.
with things like, discussions that pop up on social media, especially in the political climate we're in. It's like, how can these people
Don't you think that's actually happening even more so now? That there's a lot of reactionary, well, there's a lot of reactions and there's a lot of
Yeah.
reactionary posts that are
Yep.
being put up there. I mean, that's the whole point of it. But it's, so how do we change that? I mean, do you have tips for how to change that, or what do we do?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I thought would be important to kind of discuss is that there are ways of noticing the emotions that we're having, right? And there are ways that we're influenced that our emotions end up showing up. So, one little graphic I put together talks about how some of these things can influence your emotions, but they can also be the effect of the emotions that you're experiencing. So, physical association, this is just an easy kind of acronym to remember, PALM. So, the P in PALM would be physical associations. That's things like facial expressions, body language. You can sometimes tell a lot about the emotions that someone's going through by their facial expression,
Sure.
or body language. And sometimes, that's what influences our emotions. The way we're acting or looking can actually, like people have said, um, if you smile, you're more likely to feel positive. And,
Mhm.
and when you smile, even as you're talking on the phone, it comes across more positive. So that's kind of a two-way street there. What we are demonstrating can actually affect how we're feeling, or what we're feeling can affect what we're showing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and I'm curious if this goes here. Um, I know that on my own, um, emotional intelligence journey and getting more in touch with myself, I know that one of the things that I noticed was, and I think I've told you this story before, where petting I was petting my dog, and I realized that my jaw was clenched. It
Mm,
was just clenched, and I'm enjoying petting my dog.
mhm,
I'm enjoying, but my teeth were so clenched, and I noticed it, and I've been doing it my entire life, but I noticed it for the first time, and I think it's
mhm.
because other things had healed,
Right.
maybe, and so I noticed this thing, and it was a physical reaction to what was going on, but it wasn't, because there's no reason to clench my jaw for petting a dog. And
Mhm,
I had to go through this process of trying to figure out, well, why? Why is petting my dog causing me to clench my jaw?
mhm.
And so I was able to go back in time and figure it out. It was more of a trauma response. And, I was almost always crying when I was holding my dog as a child. And so it was like it was stuck in my physical being, these
Mhm.
emotions that I wasn't feeling anymore, but my body was still remembered. So I don't know if
Right.
that goes there in that section.
Well, I mean, it's a great point. It's kind of more advanced than what I was talking about at this point, but yeah, things like that we may not even be consciously aware of,
Yeah.
but there is a linkage there. So that's also kind of similar, but again, sort of a little more in depth than the idea of being able to read someone they may not even know they have like a tell, like if they're playing poker or something like that, where when they see their cards, they go, oh, like maybe their eyebrows go up or something like that. They may not even realize it, but it
Right.
happens.
And sometimes it's barely perceptible because they know they have the tell,
Right.
but it's still hard for them to control it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are good examples of when the physical, it can show up physically, basically. Going back to
Awesome.
that. So
Mhm.
attention is the next one. What we focus on can make a big difference in how we feel, whether you're listening to positive music or negative music or, and oh, I can't remember the doctor's name, but there was, I think, a Japanese doctor who did experiments with water crystals.
Yes.
Where
I don't know who that was, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so even the fact that water crystals formed differently when exposed to positive things versus negative things, they did it with different kinds of music. They did it even with just words written on the side of the glass or something like that. Made a huge difference in how the crystals formed.
They did the same thing with plants.
Mm-hmm.
Students were going in and they only said negative things to one plant
Mm-hmm.
and then went to the other plant and only said positive things.
Yep.
And that was it. That was the only difference between the two. And the one that had it's so see this is fascinating stuff to me.
Mm-hmm.
This is so fascinating because we didn't grow up learning this. And I love that we have a whole new generation of people that are growing up learning this. That there is energy in our words, that
Mm-hmm.
it's not just, oh, they're just words. I grew up with sticks and stones may break my bones. Well, words will never hurt me. Well,
Mm-hmm.
fuck, they do.
Yeah.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not sure if they'd be able to like break a bone, but they can definitely hurt.
they can definitely hurt. They can break you mentally.
Yeah.
And to have such a negative, to just imagining, I was thinking about this as you were doing this, just imagining that if words can have that kind of effect on a plant, then of course those words can have an effect on us. So what are you listening to?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I gave up news years ago, and I remember when somebody said, "Well, how are you going to know what's happening in the world?" I'm like, "'Cause somebody's going to tell me."
Right.
Because people are obsessed with the news, so somebody's going to tell me if there's something big, and otherwise, I don't want to hear it because it's just so negative, and it brings me down.
Right. Exactly. And so that kind of combined, so it started with talking about what we're focusing on and paying attention to. And then we got into the language, which was the next one anyway, the things that we're saying and how that can affect how we feel.
Okay.
How
Sorry, I
others
didn't mean to
feel.
jump ahead.
No, it's fine. Because they do kind of blend together. I mean,
Yeah.
typically, even as we're talking, we're making different facial expressions based on how we're talking. So they do kind of fit together. But just kind of giving you different ideas, different examples for the listeners or watchers out there. And then meaning.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm sorry, but I think that's why you're one of the reasons why your hypnotherapy tapes are so powerful. Because, because I always did them while I was sleeping, and I listened to high vibrational music while I'm sleeping. And it has had such a profound change on my life that it's mind-boggling. So I love this information. So can we bring that chart back up again?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and of course, the meaning aspect of this really goes into our experiences, what it means to us based on kind of the filters, sort of like what we were talking about last week, when it comes to how we perceive things based on our experiences, our upbringing, family influences, cultural influences, those kinds of things. So if we're in a culture where things tend to be focused more on the negative, then we're going to more likely feel negative. If we're in a culture where people and the words and the actions around us are more positive, we're more likely to feel positive.
And they can also get attached to experiences or things.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I grew up with a lot of negative meaning around money, a lot of negativity around money. And I didn't realize what an association I had between money and bad things until I took a money course.
Mm-hmm.
And and she started asking me things about, what I thought of when I thought about money, and there were different situations, and I started hearing for the first time the old tapes
Mm.
and what I thought. And then she asked me, is that true? I'm like, well, no. But I had meaning attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was negative. Oh my
Yep.
gosh. I mean, that's just crazy that could happen.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, so that's a good example even of how our emotional intelligence can affect more than just our interaction with other people, our responses to things that are more relational. That's a money thing. That wasn't about interacting with another person. That was about interacting with money. And it still was something that affected your ability to interact with money, right?
Oh yeah.
So this is a huge thing. It's not like, oh, only people who maybe deal with the public a lot need to have high emotional intelligence, like people that are in customer service or something like that. But people who are, maybe behind the scenes or just work on their own, they don't really need emotional intelligence. It's not true at all, because it applies to so many things in our
Absolutely.
lives. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, not only, and of course there's all these, and I think you're going to get into some exercises on emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
But there is there's so much power in having a high EQ. And the beautiful thing is that you can change it.
Hmm.
I think it has a much I think it's much more receptive to change than intelligence.
Mm.
I mean, you can change your emotional intelligence very, very rapidly. I don't know how quickly you can change your intelligence, but um, I'm really, really amazed at how quickly you can actually increase your emotional intelligence. So yeah, so I would love to hear about some of these. I don't know if that's where you're going next.
Yeah. Well, and since you mentioned that, that kind of brought to mind that, IQ and EQ are not directly related in terms of you don't have to have a high IQ in order to have a high EQ.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because that is so very true. And just
Yeah.
because you have a high IQ does not mean that you have high emotional intelligence.
Right. In
No.
fact, I would
Sometimes they are
I wish
some of the worst.
yeah, I was gonna say, having worked with engineers much of my life, I would say it's maybe the opposite relationship.
The
Not all
correlation
the
is
time,
backwards.
certainly, but more
No,
often.
no, 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 of course, there's always exceptions. There's always
Right.
exceptions.
All right, so let's jump into some of the different aspects of emotional intelligence, and
Okay.
then even dive into kind of how we can affect these things. So, sort of the five main components of emotional intelligence are self awareness. So, you need to be aware of even what emotions you're feeling or what's driving your emotions in different situations, self management, being able to manage those emotions so that they don't kind of lead you astray, or get you to react in a way that you don't really want to react. Motivation, and then empathy, which of course involves other people and how we understand or perceive what they're dealing with and maybe why they're acting the way they are. And then relationships, so how we can actually interact with people in a healthy way without letting emotion kind of be the barrier of something that could be even better.
Mhm.
So, as we talk about self-awareness, some of the things that you can do to just sort of check your self-awareness would be honestly to get some peer feedback. So,
Mm.
based on depending on what you're doing, if you're wanting to know how your emotional intelligence is in terms of a professional setting, then you might ask some coworkers or colleagues to give you feedback after a meeting, or just establish some situation where they're going to be able to observe you for a while, or if they've been working with you for a while, they can
Just
probably
to
give
let
you
you know.
feedback already.
And so we're just asking for what they think our emotional intelligence is, or what kind of conversation are we having here?
Well, asking things like how you come across,
Mm.
how they think that the way you interact with people is affecting those people, including but also including how they feel like you are affected by things. So when someone says something to you, how do you respond to it? Do you respond from a place of emotion or fear? Or are you responding from a place of kind of being in control of what's happening and being able to handle it?
Yeah, and I would imagine, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I would
No.
imagine this just hit me with everything that we've had going on in the past several years between COVID and election cycles and a lot of things.
Mhm.
There's just been a lot. Now I would imagine, I'll speak for myself. For myself, going through all of those things, because I hadn't gone down to the depths of some of my um, darkness, shall we say. The darkness, the things that were still there that were still very easily triggered by other people. It seemed to me that going through all of these very high stress situations can just exacerbate or make those, it's kind of like adding electricity to your emotional or to your nervous system. I felt like my nervous system was constantly fried, and just any little thing would snap me into kind of this place. Because I know the next part, I didn't have a lot of self management, but a lot of that was, I really felt like my nerves were just just raw. So, I mean, if anybody else has had that, I mean, what is that? That whole raw nervousness?
Mhm. Well, it is when you kind of it's also when or it seems like it's when you've reached a point of just overwhelm or kind of my things have boiled over, so like I don't have the capacity to absorb anymore. It's all
Yeah,
just
that was menopause. That's what menopause was like. Menopause was just a raw nerve. I was just one raw nerve.
yeah,
But yeah, learning some techniques certainly helped me. And is
yeah.
that part of the self-management? Is that how that works?
Yeah, well, a couple other ways though to check and get your self-awareness kind of set
Mm.
up
Yes,
first.
please.
In
Mhm.
addition to asking peers, obviously you can also do a self-assessment. And one of the things that I feel would probably help that is to get a list of emotion words that is bigger than what you would typically use, right? I with my clients all the time have them go through an exercise of identifying what emotions they're dealing with based on whatever issue they came in for. And it's a list that's way longer than what any of them would use in a normal conversation. And they typically, as they go through the list, they're like, wow, I didn't even think about that emotion, but yeah, I'm feeling that too.
Mm.
So sometimes it's a matter of we don't have a big emotional vocabulary. Socially, culturally speaking, we just don't use a lot of descriptive, specific emotion words. And that's why
Mhm.
some people aren't really in touch with what they're feeling because it doesn't really fit. Okay, well, I'm not happy. I don't know that I'd say I'm sad. So I don't know. I give up. I don't know what I am. There's so many words in between, like
Right.
there's all kinds of things that you could use. So finding a list of emotion words, obviously I have one that I use with my clients, but it's not like that's copyrighted or anything. You can find a
Yeah.
list online. But finding an expanded list of emotional words can help you identify really more specifically what you're feeling. And a third suggestion on how to do that self awareness part is to video yourself. And you can
Ooh.
speak to this.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've had this kind of experience with clients several times, right?
Powerful. Absolutely powerful. And the beautiful thing is once the client forgets that the camera's there, the beautiful thing about that is then you get the raw person and you can really see them. And what I have found, now this is the what I have found is that once you strip away that fear of the camera, once that's gone, once they're not thinking about it anymore, then their naturalness comes out, and people are so much more amazing than they think they are.
Mhm.
People glow in a way that they don't realize that they glow when they're just being their authentic selves, and it's a beautiful thing to see. But
Yeah.
yeah, it can be incredibly revealing, especially when their mask is on, and it can be very revealing how separate they are keeping themselves from the world, how separate they're keeping themselves from themselves, and
Right.
how they appear so different than when they're
Yeah.
just being natural.
Right.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. And so once you have established more self-awareness of your emotions, obviously you want to start looking into how you can manage those emotions. And there are so many different ways that this can be done. So it's kind of like find what works easiest and best for you, but just a few ideas, sort of like a finding a way that you can get a pattern interrupt, whether
Hmm.
it's counting to 10, doing some breathing exercises. There are heart
Yeah,
math techniques
that
that
was
can
a
help
big
with
one
this.
for me. Breathing techniques, that was great. Or even just flinging your arms, and I would
Yeah.
when it got really bad, I would just fling my arms and throw my arms down and just release that energy. It's
Yeah.
just unbelievable how much energy can be released just by doing that.
Right. And truly, the more we become aware, because it is important to become aware first, then we can do something about it. Right. And that's where it's like, yeah, pick your technique to do something about it. There's all kinds of ways to deal with that. A lot of them can involve imagery or some kind of, preconceived idea of, well, this transitions to this, and I know how that works. So let me put the negative thing over here and the positive thing over here, and then watch that transition happen. And then the negative turns into the positive along with it. That's kind of how some of the heart math techniques work.
Hmm.
But it works that way for a lot of different techniques. So just being able to kind of stop that sort of shortcut that the brain wants to take to go to a reaction right away and allow it to take the more scenic route where some thought and and control could come back into the picture
Yeah, and the
is
way I look
huge.
at that is, you're either in it or you're an observer.
Mhm.
And when you're triggered, it's so hard to be the observer. But once I was able to manage myself enough to be the observer of my emotions and be the
Yep.
observer of what's happening in the room, oh, what a game changer
Yeah.
to be an observer of yourself.
Right.
And yeah, that's a different world. And wow, I highly recommend it.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's different ways that
Especially,
you can even go about that. Having that third person perspective, that's something I use a lot with my clients as well. So whether it's seeing whatever the situation is, like it's up on a stage and it's actors playing it out instead of you going through it yourself, and then
mhm.
how do I see it when that's happening? Or as if you were floating overhead, like almost like a spirit or something looking down on what's going on. All kinds of ways that you can get that kind of different perspective and figure out a way to handle it differently. So the next aspect or component of emotional intelligence we talked about was motivation, and that is really about your experiences. What is it that is influencing your emotions? One thing that can really help kind of control the motivation aspect of emotional intelligence is getting more clear about your purpose.
Mm.
So when you feel uneasy and not sure, like, well, what am I going to do? How do I want to approach this? Because you're not sure, like, what you're trying to get out of it. It's way easier for the concerns or the worries or the fears, even about, well, what if this doesn't go right? Well, what if that doesn't happen? What if it doesn't work out the way I want it to? Those can just creep up and take over. So more clarity and more authenticity. So the more authentic and clear you are about things, the more likely you'll be able to control your emotions and handle things and respond in ways that you want to, that are going to come out positively.
Yeah, and my favorite going through this, I remember when somebody told me that, and I was like, "Yeah, but you don't know. You don't know who I'm dealing with."
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter who you're dealing with. You still have the ability to control your emotions. I'm not saying it's easy.
Right.
It's not. And sometimes it is easier to remove yourself, especially if you're not in that position to be able to remove yourself and look at yourself from third person.
Hmm.
You still have the ability to control your reactions.
Right.
No matter who it is, you have the ability to control your reactions.
And you still don't have the ability to control the other person's reactions.
No, as much as you want to.
As much as you'd like to stick your hand up and be the puppet master.
Oh my gosh. As much as I'd want to just go, let's just start this all over, and then you're not going to be here.
Right.
That's good for
Right.
me. But
Yeah.
that is fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then kind of moving to the next part of the components of emotional intelligence, empathy, right? So that's something that obviously you can get some feedback from friends or coworkers or whoever you're around about how empathetic you are. It might be better or more accurate to hear it from other people than to do a self-assessment on that. But if you feel like you need improvement in your empathy, your ability to kind of understand or care about how others may be seeing things that could be different than you, some of the things that you can do are to kind of read up on people that you may not agree with, learn more about them, because almost everyone that you may have issue with or that doesn't agree with you, it's because you're at a certain surface level. But if you kind of dig down and find out more about their story, you go, oh, I don't know how I would react to that, but boy, God bless them for getting through that. And maybe that's why they're acting this way.
Oh
So
yeah.
the more you have that kind of information of the types of things that can drive people to act certain ways, the more you can go, that's probably what's going on for them. I'm not going to try to
Let me
push their button.
let me
I'm
throw
gonna let
this
them be.
out for people who have incredibly difficult people in their life. I just want to throw this out because that's something that used to get thrown at me by this person. You need to control your emotions. And he was right. I did. I needed to control my emotions. He was right. But, and this gets, I have to bring this up because I know I'm not the only one with narcissists in their family.
Mhm.
that can also be thrown back at you and used against you. Like his perspective was, my story. It's horrible. And it is.
Mhm.
Horrible story growing up. And he was treated horrifically.
Mhm.
But I'm supposed to understand his story and be empathetic and forgive everything he says to me because he's had such a bad life.
Mhm.
Now, yes, I do need to control my emotions, but I can also remove access to me if you don't respect who I am.
Right.
I mean, I'm going through all of this effort. And that was what I had to, because I was angry about it for a long time until I realized I can remove myself. So
Mhm.
anytime this comes up, I'm going to remind people, you can also remove yourself from the situation.
Yep.
If there's, cut that access to you off. If it is a situation where there's somebody always going after your trigger points. Anyway,
Yeah.
please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that empathy and forgiveness aren't exactly the same thing. Um, they are related to each other. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they can be kind of going hand in hand, but even whether it's empathy or forgiveness, it's really for the individual, detaching them from their actions. So it doesn't really say that the actions that they're doing that may be hurtful are okay, but recognizing that, okay, they're doing something that's not right, but it's probably influenced by something that happened to them that wasn't right. Like it's
Absolutely.
doesn't give permission for the actions to continue, but it helps you to understand and just not get quite as triggered and attach it to them like that defines them, basically. That makes sense?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Or taking on what you perceive as their definition of you, because
Right.
you're the only one that can do that.
Hmm. Yeah. So then getting into the relationships aspect of emotional intelligence, in order to really understand how you're doing with that, sometimes it just takes being more aware of it. Like I said earlier, with the self awareness, it may take some practicing different situations or conversations with someone to see and like pay attention to how you're responding to things or how they're responding to you, through visual cues, auditory cues, and kinesthetic cues. So body language, how they're speaking, all those kinds of things. So just becoming more aware of those different communication types and what you're putting out and what you're receiving. That's another one that video is a great one to help you see. Because if you're involved in the conversation, in the relationship already, it's nice to see it. That gives you that sense of third person perspective, right? When you can watch a video back and see yourself and see how the interaction works, that can be a huge tool to help you improve in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you were talking, I don't know why this popped into my head, so I'm going to share it. Maybe you can tell me how it relates. I was just thinking when you're talking about relationships and observing physicalities, etc. I can always tell when something is bothering my wife. Always, always, always I can tell. And it's really, really easy to tell if it's me. If it's not because either way, my wife doesn't talk as much and averts her eyes, and not because there's lying. It's just that she's focused on whatever's going on. And the other thing, and I know that's me, when we're sitting next to each other or passing each other by, and she doesn't touch me. And so, even if we're sitting side by side, I mean, I can feel it. And I used to not be able to feel it, but I can feel it. Even if she's trying to fake it. I'm holding your hand because I know that's one of you noticed that. And even when she holds I can feel it. So it's really interesting when you really delve into this, how much you can tell, even when she's trying to say, no, everything's fine. I'm like, no, it's not. I can feel that. I know what's going on because that's not coming from me. Whatever I'm feeling isn't mine. That's yours. So what's going on?
Right.
And that took me a while to get to too, because I am such an empath, and I didn't know that for a long time. I just had all these feelings all the time. I thought they were all mine, and they're not. And so I think that this is incredibly important, but even more so for somebody who experiences a lot of feelings from around themselves, who has more input coming in, to be aware of that, so you can start separating yourself and keeping yourself, these are my emotions, those are yours.
Right.
And the more self-aware you are as an empath, the more you can divide and go, yeah, that's not mine.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point actually to make too, is that a high EQ doesn't just mean someone who demonstrates more emotions. Right. Like you might think of somebody with a high IQ as someone who could pass a test or get a higher grade on a test. So therefore they, or they have a higher end job or something like that. EQ doesn't just mean, oh, you have more emotions than I do, so therefore you have a higher EQ than I do. There's so many components to it, like we just talked about, being self-aware. And like you said, sometimes people are experiencing emotions, they're not even really theirs, but they feel the energy of it, and so they experience it. And so that there's still work for them to do there. It's a different set of work for someone who can't really get in touch with their emotions to know what they really feel. Right. So there's work on both sides of that, just different ways that they have to go about it.
Yeah. It's very interesting when you were talking about intelligence. The first thing that popped into my head, I know I'm dating myself, and there are going to be viewers that are going to be like, I don't know what that is. But you remember Cliff Clavin?
Yeah.
So Cliff Clavin from Coach, man, he had so many statistics, and he had so many facts that he would spew out to make himself sound more intelligent. And anyway, that just popped into my head.
Yeah. And he was not very emotionally intelligent either.
Oh, goodness, no. Goodness, no. Most of the people on that show weren't very emotionally intelligent, actually. Right. Yeah, I think you and I both grew up in an age where very few people on TV had emotional intelligence.
Right.
Really, Really, yeah. Oh, this is great. I love this stuff because it really has a tremendous difference and impact on your life. And increasing your emotional intelligence is not only beneficial for you personally, but it's great for you in job situations, in interpersonal communications. It's an absolute game changer for your success in your life,
Right.
having increasing your
It
emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I've seen a lot of people talking about how they ought to reconsider the curriculum in schools these days and what's required. Because some of the stuff is like, we don't even, well, I mean, they've stopped teaching things like cursive in a lot of schools now, but things like home ec, I don't even think they do home ec anymore, but that was useful information. How to iron, how to do laundry, how to cook, how to, all these things are stuff that needs to be done. And in a pinch, maybe not everybody irons their clothes, but it was good practical information. And this is one of those things that, man, if they could really revamp the school curriculums, this should be on the top of the list of what should be included. Because when you don't learn this when you're young, it's harder. It's just sort of like learning a language. It's much easier to learn a new language when you're young than it is when you've gotten older, because those types of things are still kind of firing. You have more capacity to let things in and influence how you then experience the world from that point on. And the younger we can get this into kids' minds and awareness, the
I think
better
that's
off we'll
brilliant.
be as a society.
I've been really amazed at how much further along my kids are on their emotional intelligence course, because I certainly didn't teach it to them. I didn't have enough of that while I was raising them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're exposed so much more to it now. And I'm watching my younger son passing that on to my granddaughter. Jeez,
Right.
we're almost at the end, right?
Yeah. You're not that old. Come on.
Oh, plus, no. Plus, one of our listeners just said Cliff Clavin was a character on Cheers. Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know what I said, but
You
yes, Cheers.
said
On Cheers.
coach, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
Coach. That's right. I said
Yeah.
Coach. That's not the same show.
Right.
That is not the same show at all. So thank you. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add on to here?
No, I think, this is something, there are coaches out there that do emotional intelligence. It's one of the things I've added to my services. Sometimes emotional intelligence is just weaved into other types of like life coaching and things like that. So if you are needing any kind of help to get yourself on a path of increasing your emotional intelligence, reach out. There are resources available. Don't feel like it's too overwhelming to do on your own. This is definitely something that is worth investing in.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I took a course with about emotional intelligence, emotional EQ, and the whole point of it, and this is interesting, the entire point of this course was to help you to be happier. So it's not just, if anybody's out there going, well, I don't know if I want to get this or not. If you're not happy, get more emotionally intelligent. It really does help.
Yep.
It makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Awesome. God, Jenny, thank you so much. This is fun stuff. I love talking about emotional intelligence, and that's where my heart is, because so much of nice girl training can be obliterated by just being more emotionally intelligent, understanding the messages that you're telling yourself, hearing what is going on, and realizing that those messages aren't from you. It's the conditioning that you had growing up. So thank you so much. I think what you and I both do is just, it's like this.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about that soon, because Jenny and I are talking about doing something together that's going to be of great value to our listeners. So
that's right.
Thank you so much. If you enjoyed today's episode, please spread the word. We'd love for you to do that. And don't forget to visit us at, I don't know why it says that. That's not right. Don't forget to visit us at unleashedafpodcast.com and go to WWJDD, What Would Jenny and Deidre Do, to ask any of your questions. Or if you have a topic suggestion, question, or want to be a guest. Look at you being fancy, Jenny. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And next week, we're going to be tackling reprogramming limiting beliefs. Another fun subject. I love this. and practical tools to shift your mindset. And I'm sure we're both going to come with great tools for all of you, since this is in both of our wheelhouses. And I know I need to go look for the outro. Okay. Is there anything else you want to add, Jenny?
No, I think we're good. We'll see everybody
This
next
has been
week.
great. We're going to go into an after show right now and continue this discussion, because I know there are other things that I wanted to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and head out. But thank you so much, and take care until next week.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready